The office felt different that evening, the air thick with an unspoken tension. As I stepped inside, the emptiness enveloped me, a stark contrast to the chaos of the day outside. I could feel my heart racing, every echo of my footsteps amplifying the silence. And then I saw him. Jake. His gaze pierced through me, a magnetic force that froze me in place. "Hey," he said, his voice low and inviting, sending a shiver down my spine. "Hi," I managed to reply, my pulse quickening. I was acutely aware of the memory of Tom, my husband, waiting for me at home, oblivious to the storm brewing in my heart. But in that moment, the thought of him faded into the background, overshadowed by the intensity of Jake's presence. Jake took a step closer, and I felt an impulse I couldn't control. "You're here late," he noted, a teasing smile playing on his lips. "I had some reports to finish," I said, though we both knew it was more than that. Our eyes locked, and I could see the flicker of something deeper in his. The air thickened around us, charged with a tension I had never experienced before. "Sometimes," he murmured, "the quiet can be tempting." His words hung in the air, heavy with implication. The room felt smaller, the boundaries of professionalism blurring as I fought against the pull of attraction. I looked away, my heart pounding. What was happening to me? Was I really considering crossing a line that I never thought I would? I remember the first day I walked into the office, a mix of excitement and nerves swirling inside me. The moment I stepped through the doorway, I was greeted by the hum of activity, the sound of keyboards clacking, and the low murmur of conversations. But it was Jake's smile that caught my attention. He stood there, leaning casually against the wall, his dark hair slightly tousled and a glint of mischief in his eyes. "Hi, I'm Jake," he said, extending a hand. I was momentarily taken aback by his charm. "Welcome to the team." "Thanks," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. I could feel a warmth creeping up my cheeks as I shook his hand, a simple gesture that somehow felt electric. There was something about his presence that made my heart race. As the days turned into weeks, those early interactions turned into something more. In meetings, our eyes would meet across the table, and I could feel the tension building with each stolen glance. It was innocent at first, just playful banter and the occasional shared joke. But with each smile, I felt more alive, more vibrant than I had in a long time. "Did you hear about the new project?" Jake asked one afternoon, leaning closer to me than necessary. His scent was intoxicating, a mix of cologne and something distinctly him. "Yeah, I think it could be interesting," I replied, trying to sound casual. Inside, I was a bundle of nerves, acutely aware of how close he was. He chuckled softly, his eyes sparkling with mischief. "I think we should team up. We could really make it shine." "Sure," I said, feeling a flutter in my stomach. I knew I shouldn't feel this way, but it was hard to ignore the chemistry between us. There was one meeting that stood out, where he told a joke that caught me off guard. I laughed, a genuine laugh that echoed in the room. For a brief moment, the world around us faded away, and all I could see was him. The way he looked at me, with that captivating smile, made my heart skip a beat. "You have a beautiful laugh," he said, his voice low, almost intimate. I felt my breath hitch as I met his gaze. "Thanks, I guess," I stammered, suddenly shy. I quickly looked away, pretending to focus on the presentation. But the moment lingered, a spark igniting something deep within me. Evenings turned into long nights of work, and we found ourselves spending more time together. It felt natural, as if we were two pieces of a puzzle that fit perfectly. I didn't want to admit it, but I was drawn to him in a way I hadn't felt in years. One night, as we finished up a project, Jake reached out and brushed a stray hair behind my ear. The simple touch sent shivers down my spine. "You okay?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, but my heart raced. Just tired, I guess. He studied me for a moment, his gaze intense. You sure? You look a bit flushed. I forced a laugh, trying to play it off. It's just the office lights. He smirked. Right, the office lights. There was something in his tone, a teasing challenge that made my heart pound. Days turned into weeks, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was changing between us. I found myself daydreaming about him, even when I was at home with Tom. The guilt weighed on me, but the thrill of the connection I felt with Jake was intoxicating. As I lay beside Tom, listening to his steady breathing, I couldn't help but think of Jake. The way he smiled, the way he could make me laugh, made me feel alive in a way that I hadn't felt in what seemed like forever. I tried to push those thoughts away, focusing instead on the warmth of Tom's presence. But there was a part of me that craved more, a part that wanted to explore the connection I had with Jake. I knew it was wrong, but the allure was undeniable. One afternoon, while working late, Jake leaned closer to me, his breath warm against my ear. "Can I tell you something?" he asked, his voice low and inviting. "Of course," I replied, my heart racing. "I enjoy our time together. More than I probably should," he admitted, his gaze piercing mine. I swallowed hard, feeling a rush of emotions swirl within me. "Me too," I confessed, the words slipping out before I could stop them. He smiled, a mixture of relief and desire flickering in his eyes. Good. I thought I was the only one. In that moment, everything shifted. I could no longer deny the pull I felt towards him. The thrill of the unspoken tension hung in the air, intoxicating and dangerous. I knew I was walking a fine line, torn between loyalty to Tom and the exhilarating connection I had with Jake. Yet despite the risks, I felt more alive than ever. I'm not sure when it started, but the project that brought Jake and me together was like a spark waiting to ignite. We spent countless late nights in the office, surrounded by piles of paperwork and the glow of our computer screens. The air was thick with tension, and every shared laugh or accidental brush of our arms sent shivers down my spine. One evening, as we worked side by side, I felt the heat radiating from him. He turned to me, his eyes dark and intense. "You know, we make a pretty good team," he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. I nodded, trying to ignore the way my heart raced at the sound of his words. "Yeah, we do. It's been fun." But it felt like so much more than that. I tried to focus on the task at hand, but all I could think about was how close he was, how his presence filled the room with an undeniable energy. I could feel the warmth of his body next to mine, and it was intoxicating. I glanced at him, and for a moment, our eyes locked. I could see the desire mirrored in his gaze, and it took my breath away. Then, it happened. Jake reached out and casually touched my arm, his fingers lingering for just a moment longer than necessary. My skin tingled where he had touched me, and I felt an instinctive pull toward him. "Sorry, I didn't mean to," he started, but I shook my head. "No, it's fine. The project is stressful, I suppose." I tried to sound nonchalant, but my voice betrayed me. It was shaky, laced with something I didn't want to admit. I could see the corners of his mouth lift into a teasing smile, and it made my stomach flip. "Stressful? Or exciting?" he asked, leaning slightly closer. The way he said it made it sound like a challenge. I could feel the air crackling between us, and I wondered if he could hear my heart pounding. "Maybe a bit of both," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. As the nights turned into weeks, our late-night work sessions became charged with an unspoken tension. We shared more than just ideas and reports. We talked about our lives, our dreams, and our fears. I found myself opening up to him, in ways I hadn't with anyone else. Jake had a way of making me feel seen, of making me feel alive again. One night, we were deep in conversation about our aspirations. "I've always wanted to travel the world," he said, his eyes shining with passion. "What about you?" I hesitated, thinking of Tom and the life we had built together. But in that moment, I didn't want to think about the past. "I used to dream about it too," I replied softly. "But life has a way of getting in the way." "Maybe it doesn't have to," he said, his voice hopeful. "Maybe we can still chase our dreams." The longing in his tone resonated within me, stirring something I had buried deep. Then came the moment that changed everything. We were sitting close, laughing at something silly. When our laughter faded into a charged silence, I could feel the heat radiating from him, and it was drawing me in. I leaned in, and for a heartbeat, I thought we might actually kiss. Our lips were so close, almost touching, but I pulled back just in time, heart racing and mind spinning. "What was that?" I asked, trying to sound casual, but my breath came out uneven. "I don't know," he murmured, his eyes still locked on mine. "But I want to find out." The pull between us was undeniable, but the guilt washed over me like a cold wave. I thought of Tom waiting for me at home, the life we had built. But as I looked into Jake's eyes, I felt a part of me yearning for something more, something I hadn't felt in a long time. Those moments haunted me. The connection I had with Jake was intoxicating, yet terrifying. I found myself daydreaming about him, about what it would be like to give in to this desire. The sleepless nights became filled with thoughts of him, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were crossing a line I shouldn't even be considering. But every time I saw him, that line blurred a little more. The way he smiled at me, the way he listened, everything about him felt magnetic. I was drawn to him, and it scared me. I tried to remind myself of my commitment to Tom, but in those moments with Jake, it felt like I was living in a different world, one where I could be free. We continued to work late into the night, the tension between us simmering just below the surface. I couldn't ignore it any longer, and neither could Jake. There was something electric in the air, and I knew we were standing on the edge of something we could never take back. As I left the office that night, I had to remind myself to breathe. The thrill of being so close to Jake, the temptation of crossing that line, it was exhilarating and terrifying all at once. With every passing day, I felt myself slipping further away from the life I had known, and deeper into the unknown that Jake represented. I can still remember the moment everything began to change. It started with a simple text message, one I should have ignored, but the thrill of it was too enticing. "Hey, are you still working late? Need some company?" It was from Jake, my colleague, the one who made my heart race just by being in the same room. At first, I hesitated. I thought of Tom, my husband, who was probably at home waiting for me to come back, to share our mundane evening together. He was always so understanding about my late hours at work. "You work too hard," he would tease, his voice light and carefree. I felt a pang of guilt thinking about him. But then I remembered how Jake's gaze had lingered on me during meetings, how that simple touch on my arm had sent a shiver down my spine. "Just for a little while," I texted back, my heart pounding in my chest. I pushed open the office door, and there he was, leaning against the desk, a casual smile playing on his lips. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he said, his voice smooth and inviting. The tension in the air was palpable. I could feel my resolve slipping away as I looked into his eyes. They sparkled with mischief, a stark contrast to the warmth I felt at home with Tom. "I thought I could use a break," I replied, trying to sound nonchalant, even though my pulse raced. As we chatted, the conversation flowed easily, but the underlying tension was undeniable. Our messages had started to take on a more intimate tone over the past few weeks. Little jokes and teasing comments that made my heart flutter. I felt a thrill at the thought of it. But then guilt crashed over me like a wave. I couldn't help but think of Tom, his kind smile and soft laughter. Jake leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "You know, I've always thought you were incredible." The way he looked at me sent heat coursing through my veins. I wanted to pull away, to remind myself of my vows, but the pull between us was magnetic. Every time our eyes met, I felt that unspoken connection grow stronger. It was like we were sharing a secret that no one else knew. "You really think so?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, feeling exposed under his gaze. "Of course," he replied, leaning back slightly, but not breaking our gaze. "You're not just another face in the office. You stand out." His sincerity made my heart flutter, and I could feel myself leaning in closer, drawn to him in a way I had never expected. The shift from colleagues to something more was subtle at first, but it quickly became too intense to ignore. I found myself waiting for his messages, the way they made me feel alive again. I couldn't shake the guilt, though. I loved Tom, or at least I thought I did. But with Jake, there was an excitement that I hadn't felt in years. One afternoon, as I sat at my desk, trying to focus on a report, Jake sent me a message. "Meet me in the break room. I need to talk to you." My stomach flipped at the thought of being alone with him. What if someone saw us? What if Tom found out? But the thrill was too much to resist. I glanced around, my heart racing, before slipping out of my office. When I entered the break room, Jake was already there, leaning against the counter, his arms crossed. "You came," he said, his smile wide and inviting. "I thought you needed to talk," I replied, trying to sound cool, but my heart was pounding in my chest. He stepped closer, the air between us crackling with electricity. "I do, but it's more than just work." His eyes searched mine, and I felt a rush of warmth spread through me. "Jake, we shouldn't..." I started to protest, but my voice faltered as he took another step closer. "Just hear me out," he said softly. "I can't stop thinking about you. Every time we work together, it's like there's something between us, something I can't ignore." I felt my breath hitch in my throat. The confession hung in the air, a heavy weight that felt both exhilarating and terrifying. "But what about Tom?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He shrugged, his gaze unwavering. "What about him? You deserve to feel desired, to feel alive." His words struck a chord deep within me. I felt torn between my life with Tom and this dangerous new thrill that Jake offered. As I stood there, I could feel the tension between us building, the air thick with unspoken desires. I knew I should walk away, but I couldn't. I wanted to lean into this moment, to explore what could be, despite the consequences that loomed over me like a dark cloud. Jake reached out, brushing a stray hair behind my ear, his touch sending shivers down my spine. "You and I, we have something special. Don't deny it," he said, his voice low and inviting. I looked into his eyes, feeling the world around us fade away. The lines between right and wrong blurred, and all I could think about was the pull between us. I felt alive, caught in this whirlwind of emotions that I hadn't experienced in far too long. In that moment, I made a choice. I chose to ignore the warning bells ringing in my mind and to embrace the thrill of the unknown. The excitement of what could happen with Jake overshadowed the guilt that threatened to consume me. I was stepping into a dangerous game, and for the first time, I was eager to play. I stood in the dimly lit conference room, my heart racing as I waited for Jake. The tension in the air felt like static electricity, crackling and pulsing around me. I could hear my breath quickening, each inhale a reminder of what I was about to do. The large oak table in front of me seemed to loom, a silent witness to the choices I was making. I glanced at my watch, the minutes feeling like hours as I fought the urge to turn and leave. When Jake finally walked in, my breath hitched in my throat. He looked effortlessly handsome, his dark hair slightly tousled, and his blue eyes shimmering with a mix of mischief and something deeper. "Hey," he said, his voice low and inviting, sending a shiver down my spine. "I was beginning to think you'd changed your mind." I forced a smile, trying to mask the whirlwind of emotions inside me. "I almost did," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. But I couldn't. The truth was, I was terrified, but exhilarated at the same time. I knew I shouldn't be here, yet the pull towards him was undeniable. Jake stepped closer, the scent of his cologne wrapping around me like a warm embrace. "Do you really want this?" he asked, his gaze locking onto mine, searching for any sign of hesitation. The question hung in the air, heavy with implications. I thought of Tom, my husband, waiting for me at home, oblivious to the storm brewing within me. But the desire to be with Jake was like a fire, raging and consuming all rational thought. "I do," I confessed, surprising even myself with the strength of my conviction. "I can't help it." A slow smile spread across his face, one that made my heart race. "Good," he said simply, and then he crossed the final distance between us. His hand brushed against my arm, igniting a spark that raced through my entire body. I've wanted this for so long. Before I could respond, he leaned in, his lips capturing mine in a heated kiss. It was everything I had imagined, and more. The world around us faded away as the kiss deepened, igniting a fire within me that I didn't know I had. It felt wrong, and yet so right. I could feel the electricity coursing through my veins, and in that moment, nothing else mattered. I pulled away slightly, breathless and overwhelmed. "What are we doing?" I asked, the reality of the situation crashing down on me. "This is insane." "I know," Jake replied, his forehead resting against mine. "But I can't stop thinking about you. About us." I closed my eyes, fighting the guilt that threatened to swallow me whole. "What about Tom?" I whispered, the name feeling like a betrayal on my tongue. Jake's expression softened, but he didn't look away. "I'm not asking you to leave him. I just want to explore this. Whatever it is between us." I felt a pang of guilt slice through me. "And what if he finds out?" "Let him," Jake said, his voice gaining confidence. "This is about us, not him. You deserve to feel alive, to feel desired." His words ignited something within me, a longing that had been buried under layers of routine and obligation. I wanted to feel alive again, and Jake was offering me that chance. "You make it sound so easy," I murmured, my head spinning with the possibilities. "Because it can be," he insisted, leaning in closer. "Just let go." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of my choice. The thrill of danger was intoxicating, and the thrill of being wanted by someone like Jake was something I hadn't felt in years. I nodded slowly, my heart racing at the thought of what might come next. "Okay," I said, my voice trembling with anticipation. "Let's see where this goes." As we kissed again, I felt the world shift beneath me. The thrill of secrecy and the heat of his body against mine ignited a fire that I thought had long been extinguished. I knew this was wrong, but in that moment, it felt so right. The conference room became our own little universe, isolating us from the reality waiting outside those doors. The kiss deepened, and I felt his hands slide to my waist, pulling me closer. The kiss was no longer just a sweet exploration. It was a promise, a declaration of everything we had dared to dream, but never said aloud. My mind was a flurry of thoughts, Tom, the life we had built together, the love that felt so secure, yet so confining. But in Jake's arms, I felt a different kind of alive, a pulse of excitement that made me forget everything else. "Are you sure about this?" Jake murmured between kisses, his breath warm against my lips. "I'm not sure of anything," I admitted, pulling away just enough to look into his eyes. "But I want to be here, with you." His smile was a mix of triumph and desire. "Then let's not waste another moment." The thrill of the unknown wrapped around us like a shroud, and I surrendered to the moment. I knew I was stepping into a dangerous game, one that could unravel everything. Yet, the excitement of what lay ahead made every risk feel worth it. I was ready to embrace the chaos, to dive into this forbidden connection that had ignited a fire within me I thought I had lost forever. I stepped into the hotel room, my heart racing with a mix of thrill and dread. The door clicked shut behind me, and I felt a rush of adrenaline flood my veins. Here I was, alone with Jake, far away from the prying eyes of colleagues and the expectations of home. It was just us, in a space that felt both foreign and electric. Jake stood by the window, the city lights casting a warm glow on his features. He turned to me, his eyes dark with desire. "Are you sure about this?" he asked, his voice low and steady, though I could hear the tremor of anticipation beneath the surface. I swallowed hard, my thoughts racing. I thought of Tom, waiting for me at home, blissfully unaware of my inner turmoil. But the moment I met Jake's gaze, the lingering guilt faded into the background. I nodded, my voice barely a whisper. "I need this." The distance between us closed in an instant. Jake stepped forward, his hands finding my waist, pulling me closer. The warmth of his body against mine ignited something deep within me. I could feel the heat radiating from him, and it made my skin tingle with an urgency I had never felt before. "You're so beautiful," he murmured, brushing a strand of hair behind my ear. His touch sent shivers down my spine, and for a moment, I forgot everything else. I closed my eyes, leaning into him, feeling the weight of his hands on my back. When I opened my eyes again, I saw his face inches from mine, a mixture of longing and restraint etched into his features. "I can't believe we're really doing this," he said, his breath mingling with mine. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, the thrill of the forbidden overwhelming me. "Neither can I admitted, my voice shaky. And then, without thinking, I closed the gap between us, capturing his lips with mine. The kiss was electric, a jolt that sent waves of pleasure coursing through me. It was as if every moment of tension from our time together finally exploded in that one instant. I melted against him, my hands tangling in his hair as I deepened the kiss, losing myself in the taste of him. Jake's hands roamed my back, pulling me tighter against him. The world outside faded away, leaving only the intoxicating heat of our connection. I felt alive, more alive than I had in years, and it scared me. I was betraying Tom, yet all I could focus on was Jake and the way he made me feel. "Let's forget everything," Jake whispered between kisses, his voice thick with urgency. "Just for tonight." I nodded, breathless, the weight of my double life heavy on my shoulders, yet somehow lighter in that moment. I wanted to forget the guilt, the promises I had made, the life I had built with Tom. All I wanted was this, the warmth of Jake's body, the way his hands explored me, igniting a fire I didn't know I had. We stumbled back onto the bed, laughter bubbling up between us as we lost ourselves in the moment. The sheets felt cool against my skin, contrasting sharply with the heat that radiated from Jake. He hovered over me, his eyes dark and intense, and I couldn't help but feel both exhilarated and terrified. "Are you sure?" he asked again, searching my eyes for any sign of hesitation. I took a deep breath, my heart racing. "I'm sure," I replied, my voice steady. And with that, he leaned down, capturing my lips again, his kisses becoming more fervent, more desperate. The world outside ceased to exist, and all that mattered was the heat between us, the rhythm of our breaths, and the way our bodies moved together. For a brief moment, I allowed myself to forget about Tom entirely. I lost myself in Jake's touch, the way he traced my skin with his fingers, igniting every nerve ending. I felt powerful and vulnerable all at once, and I didn't want it to end. But in the back of my mind, the thought of Tom lingered like a ghost. I tried to push it away, shoving it deep down so I could focus solely on Jake. I didn't want to think about the man who waited for me at home, who trusted me completely. The guilt would come later. Right now, I was consumed by the thrill of being with Jake, the heat of his body against mine, the way he whispered my name like a prayer. "God, you're incredible," Jake breathed, his hands exploring my body, igniting every inch of me. I felt alive, yet the thought of Tom crept back in, nagging at the edges of my mind. But as Jake kissed me again, I pushed it aside, surrendering completely to the moment. I didn't want to think about the consequences. I just wanted to feel. As the night wore on, I lost track of time, caught up in a whirlwind of passion and desire. I let myself be swept away, forgetting everything except the man beside me and the way he made me feel. It was reckless and exhilarating, and in that moment, nothing else mattered. But as dawn approached, reality began to seep back in, and I knew I would have to face the consequences of my choices. Still, as I lay beside Jake, the weight of my decisions pressing down on me, I couldn't help but wonder, was this fleeting moment worth the chaos that would surely follow? I'm sitting at my desk, the office empty around me, the silence amplifying the chaos in my mind. Just a few hours ago, the room was buzzing with colleagues, laughter echoing, and now it feels like a vast void. I take a deep breath, trying to dispel the tension that has settled into my bones. But as I look up, my gaze meets Jake's. He stands by the door, his presence electric, and suddenly I am frozen in place. "Hey," he says, his voice low, almost a whisper. "Hey," I manage to reply, but the word feels inadequate, almost trivial against the weight of what is hanging between us. I remember Tom, my husband, waiting for me at home, his smile warm and inviting. But here, in this moment, all I can think about is Jake. He steps closer, and the air thickens with an intensity I can't ignore. It's like a magnet pulling me towards him, and I feel the familiar pulse of desire start to rise within me. "Are you staying late?" he asks, his eyes searching mine, and I know he can sense the turmoil within me. "I was just finishing up some reports," I say, my voice shaky. "You?" "Same," he replies, leaning against the desk, the casual stance belying the tension in his eyes. "I thought maybe we could go over the project together." My heart races at the suggestion. I should say no. I should put distance between us. But instead, I nod. "Sure, why not?" As we sit together, the conversation flows easily. But underneath the words, there's an unspoken connection that makes every laugh feel more intense, every shared glance linger longer. I can't remember the last time I felt this alive, even with Tom. Jake's presence awakens something in me that I've long since buried. "Do you remember the first day I started?" Jake asks. And I can't help but smile at the memory. "Of course. You came in with that charming smile and I thought, who is this guy?" He laughs, the sound warm and inviting. "I was so nervous. I thought you'd be the one to judge me." "Me? Never," I tease, feeling a flutter in my stomach. But as our laughter fades, I catch the intensity in his gaze again. There's a moment where everything else disappears, and it's just us. The office, the work, even Tom's face flashes in my mind, but quickly fades as Jake leans in just a fraction closer. I remember the nights we've spent working together. Long hours filled with discussions that drifted from work to dreams and aspirations. The casual touch on my arm, the way he holds my gaze just a little too long. I can still feel the heat from that first almost kiss, the way it lingered in the air between us, making me question everything I thought I wanted. "Do you ever feel like we're meant for something more?" he asks suddenly, his voice low and intense. The question sends a shiver down my spine. "What do you mean?" "Like, we have this connection. It's more than just colleagues working together." I swallow hard, my heart racing. I want to say yes, to give in to the pull between us, but my mind drifts back to Tom. I can't betray him, can I? "I don't know, Jake," I admit, my voice shaky. "I'm married." "I know," he replies, his expression softening. "But we can't deny what's happening here." The truth of his words settles heavily in the air. I feel a thrill at the danger of it all, the excitement mixed with guilt. I should step back, but instead, I find myself leaning in closer. As the days pass, the messages between us grow more intimate, filled with innuendos and hidden meanings. Each notification from him sends a wave of excitement through me, and I can't help but feel alive. But with each stolen moment, the weight of my double life grows heavier. I catch glimpses of Tom, his trusting smile as he talks about our future. I feel a pang of guilt, but the thrill of my secret with Jake drowns it out. The way he looks at me, the way he makes me feel, it's intoxicating. One afternoon, as we sneak away to a quiet corner of the office, the tension is palpable. I can feel my heart pounding in my chest as Jake leans in, brushing his fingers against my skin. "You're so beautiful," he whispers, and the sincerity in his voice sends a rush of warmth through me. "Jake, we shouldn't," I begin, but the words fade as he captures my lips with his. The kiss is electric, igniting everything I've been trying to suppress. The danger of being caught only heightens the thrill, and I find myself wrapped up in the moment, forgetting everything and everyone else. Later, as I leave the office, I glance back at Jake, the memory of his lips on mine burning in my mind. I know I'm playing with fire, but I can't stop. The need for those hidden encounters grows stronger, the thrill of deception almost addictive. I catch Tom's eye as I walk through the door to our home, and he greets me with a warm smile. "How was work?" he asks. "Busy as always," I reply, forcing a smile. But inside, I feel the weight of my secret pressing down on me. The lies are becoming a routine, and I can't shake the feeling that it's only a matter of time before everything unravels. "I'm sorry, I can't assist with that. I'm not sure when it started." This feeling that surged inside me like a tide I couldn't hold back. It was all too easy to let it grow, to ignore the warning signs, especially when I was with Jake. I remember the day clearly, the moment when everything changed. We had been working late again, the fluorescent lights casting a harsh glow over the empty office. I could hear the hum of the computer and the faint sound of the city outside, but all I could focus on was him. Jake was leaning against his desk, his gaze steady and penetrating. "You look tired," he said, a hint of mischief dancing in his eyes. His voice was low, almost a whisper, as if the words themselves were a secret meant only for me. I felt my heart skip a beat. "Yeah, just the usual workload," I replied, trying to sound casual. But as I looked into his eyes, I felt a thrill of something dangerous. I shook my head, pushing away the thought of Tom, my husband, waiting for me at home. "Want to take a break?" Jake suggested, stepping closer. The air between us charged with an energy I had never felt before. My breath caught in my throat, I wanted to say no, to remind myself of my vows, but the words didn't come. Maybe just for a minute, I found myself saying, my voice barely above a whisper. The moment I said it, a sense of freedom washed over me. We walked to the small break room, the tension palpable in the air. I could feel the weight of my choices bearing down on me. As we settled into the dimly lit space, I forced myself to remember Tom's smile, the way he always supported me, always believed in me. Yet, here I was, flirting with the edges of my desire, my heart racing at the thought of what might happen next. Jake turned towards me, his expression serious. "I need to be honest," he said. "I've liked you since we started working together." His confession hung in the air, thick and intoxicating. I felt a mix of fear and excitement. "You shouldn't say stuff like that," I replied, my voice trembling. But deep down, I felt a flicker of hope. "I can't help it," he said, stepping even closer. "I can see how incredible you are, and I can't pretend it doesn't matter to me." I swallowed hard. My mind raced with thoughts of Tom, of the life we had built together. Yet, the pull towards Jake was undeniable. I knew this was wrong, but I was drowning in the thrill of it all. Before I could find the words to push him away, Jake reached out, brushing a strand of hair behind my ear. The touch was electric, sending shivers down my spine. "Tell me to stop," he urged, his voice thick with emotion. I should have told him to stop. I should have walked away. But instead, I found myself paralyzed by the moment, the need for something real and raw, overpowering my sense of right and wrong. "I don't know if I can," I admitted, my heart racing. His gaze darkened, and I could see the desire flickering in his eyes. "Then let's not think about it, just for tonight." In that moment, I made a choice. The weight of my marriage felt like a distant memory, overshadowed by the promise of something new, something I had been craving without even realizing it. Our lips met in a tentative kiss, and the world around us faded away. I was lost in the heat of his body, the way he held me as if I were the most precious thing in the world. Every worry, every ounce of guilt melted away in that instant. It was exhilarating, intoxicating, and terrifying all at once. "What are we doing?" I whispered, pulling away slightly, searching his eyes for answers. "Something we both needed," he replied, his breath warm against my skin. I shook my head, the reality crashing back in. "But Tom..." Jake cupped my face, his thumb brushing over my cheek. "What about him? You deserve to feel alive too." His words ignited a fire within me, one I had buried for far too long. The thrill of the moment, the danger of being caught, was unlike anything I had ever experienced. Here was a man who saw me, who wanted me, and I was desperate to embrace that feeling. As the night wore on, I was swept away by the passion that consumed us. We stole moments together, talking about our dreams, our fears, and the weight of our decisions. With each shared secret, I felt more tethered to him and more detached from the life I had known. Finally, as we lay together, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was crossing a line I could never return from. But in Jake's arms, I felt free, alive in a way I hadn't felt in years. "Do you think we're making a mistake?" I asked softly, knowing the answer but afraid to hear it. Jake kissed my forehead, holding me close. "No, this feels right. Just let it happen." And just like that, I made my choice. The thrill of our connection outweighed the guilt that gnawed at the back of my mind. I knew there would be consequences. But in that moment, all I could think about was the intensity of what we had discovered together. As the night deepened, I felt my resolve fading. I wanted to live, to feel every moment. to embrace the passion that had ignited between us. I was ready to surrender completely, to let go of everything I had ever known and dive headfirst into this new reality, unaware of the storm that lay ahead. I had been standing in front of the mirror, smoothing down my blouse, trying to look presentable for another long night at the office. But as I stepped into the empty workspace, I could feel the weight of tension in the air. The dim light flickered above me, casting shadows that danced eerily along the walls. I took a deep breath, hoping it would calm the fluttering in my stomach. I was here to work, but I knew it was more than that. Jake was already there, his tall frame leaning against his desk, his eyes locked onto mine as I entered. His gaze was intense, almost magnetic, and it sent a shiver down my spine. I had to remind myself of Tom, my husband, who was waiting for me at home, blissfully unaware of the turmoil brewing within me. I shook the thought away, but it lingered like a ghost. "Hey, you made it," Jake said, his voice smooth and inviting, breaking the silence that wrapped around us. "Yeah, I thought I'd catch up on some work," I replied, trying to keep my tone casual, but my heart raced as he stepped closer, the space between us shrinking. I could feel the heat radiating off him, and it was intoxicating. "I'm glad you're here. I was starting to think I'd be alone all night," he said, a playful smirk tugging at his lips. That smile had been the first thing that drew me to him on my first day at the office. It was charming, disarming, and now it felt like a dangerous invitation. I forced a laugh, trying to mask my growing attraction. "You know how it is, deadlines don't wait." But even as I said it, I could feel the pull between us, stronger than ever. We fell into a rhythm, working side by side, the tension mounting with every shared glance and casual touch. I could hardly concentrate on the numbers and reports sprawled across my desk. Instead, my mind wandered to thoughts of Jake, and I couldn't help but recall our first day together. I remembered his smile, how it lit up the room, and the way he had looked at me when he introduced himself. I had felt a thrill then, a spark that had ignited something deep inside me. I had laughed at his jokes, something I hadn't done in a long time, and it felt like I was rediscovering a part of myself I had lost. Even next to Tom, I felt alive again. But now, standing just a few feet away, the truth of my feelings was undeniable. The longer I was around Jake, the more I craved him. I could sense the shift in our relationship, the late-night texts that grew more intimate, the way our eyes lingered on each other during meetings. It felt like we were dancing on the edge of something dangerous, and I didn't know how to pull back. As night fell, the office grew darker, and the only light came from the glow of our computer screens. I could feel the electricity in the air, and I knew we were both aware of it. I felt his fingertips brush my arm as he reached for a file, and my breath caught in my throat. "Sorry," he murmured, but his eyes sparkled with mischief. "Didn't mean to distract you." "Distract? Not at all," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. I could feel the heat rising to my cheeks, and I wanted nothing more than for him to lean in closer. It happened so fast. One moment we were talking about work, and the next, I found myself standing in front of him, my heart racing as he closed the distance between us. I could see the desire in his eyes, and it reflected my own longing. "Can I?" he started, and before I could respond, he was kissing me. It was soft at first, a mere brush of lips, but it quickly turned passionate. My body responded instinctively, leaning into him, forgetting everything except the fire igniting between us. The kiss felt like a revelation. It was wrong, and yet, it felt so right. I could taste the danger on his lips, and it thrilled me. But then, just as quickly as it began, I pulled away, breathless and shaken. "Jake, we can't," I whispered, my mind racing with thoughts of Tom, "I know," he said, his voice low and filled with longing. "But I can't help how I feel about you. I've tried, but it's impossible." I felt a pang of guilt wash over me. Tom was my husband, my partner. But the truth was, the way Jake made me feel was intoxicating. He looked at me as if I were the only person in the world, and with Tom, I felt like I was fading away. "I shouldn't be doing this," I said, but my body betrayed me. It craved his touch, his presence. "Just one night," he pleaded, his eyes searching mine. "I promise it will be worth it." The words hung in the air, heavy with promise and danger. My heart raced as I weighed my options. I knew I was about to cross a line I could never uncross. But the thrill of the unknown beckoned to me like a siren song. "Just tonight," I finally said, knowing the consequences could be catastrophic. As soon as the words left my lips, the tension between us shifted, crackling with electricity. Jake stepped closer, his hands finding my waist, pulling me against him. He whispered sweet promises into my ear, and my body responded, overwhelmed by desire. But then, I heard it, the sound of keys jangling in the lock. My heart dropped. "Tom," I gasped, panic flooding my veins. Jake froze, his eyes wide with alarm. We were caught in a moment that would change everything, and I felt the rush of desperation mixed with adrenaline. I didn't know what would happen next, but I knew I was standing at the precipice of my own choices, teetering between the life I had and the one I was about to choose.